All right. Hello, clay buddies and everyone. I am setting up here, John Britt here. We're going to show you how to glaze, the actual real world glazing. It's kind of a clustery setup here because I can't really be back in the other room unless I have somebody to help me. But anyway, we're going to do the best we can. Keep you busy during the virus. Let's see. So I'm going to try to go not too fast because we've got an hour, but I probably only have a half an hour on my camera. So we're going to just do the best we can with that. That'll be plenty of material for you. I'm looking around here trying to think if I can do this well. All right, well, let's just start. What we're going to do first, I'm going to have to move the camera a few times here, but I tried to be organized for you. What we're going to do is glaze, this tile is the thing we're kind of after. It's a spotted purple glaze. If I fire it slowly, it'll turn completely the sort of lavendery pinky purple. Okay, and I have to make sure I focus sometimes. These are the things that we're making now with the cups. So I made this cup, and what I did was I put it on the bottom. I put the purple on here, then I put the seafoam on here, and then I have a white liner in there. And this is on frost porcelain. Show you some other ones here. So here's another version with no seafoam, and here's another version. Okay, so that is the deal. Like here you can see I poured it here, and then I poured the seafoam, and where they join up, it gives you a different color. All right, so now just so we know what's happening, here's the glaze recipe. Randy's purple, so I took Randy's red base, I left out the iron, and then I added cobalt. So I have a whole video up of showing different variations of that, like 1% cobalt, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, like that. And so I came up with this recipe. It was pretty good between cone 6 and cone 8, and I'll show you the cycle in a second. But then I wanted to put a liner in that was pretty close, so I took the Randy's base and left everything out, so that's the base, and then I added 8 zircon packs to make it a white. And I put down like the specific gravities here, and I will explain that in a little bit. I'll explain that I don't really do that a lot. I do it sometimes if I'm in trouble or something, or if it's real fussy. But I'll explain all that later. Okay, then here's the seafoam chun. It's called seafoam green or chun seafoam. There's lots of names for it. Super nice glaze. It's got, it's a Bristol glaze with calcium and zinc. And then the colorants in there are titanium and, I'm sorry, the opacifier is titanium. The colorant is copper, and that's a little bit thicker. All right. So make sure you remember it's on frost porcelain, so if you do it on a stoneware, it's not going to come out the same. May be fine, but may not be. You may also could try using a white slip on your stoneware. All right, so this is a version, the firing then is a version of the E1 cycle, which is 200 degrees an hour to 200, 500 to 1978. This is Fahrenheit, by the way. And then it's 150 to, and this will make it a nice cone 6. Sometimes I add a soak in here, 15-minute soak or a 20-minute soak. It just changes things a lot with these spots. So you have to mess around to find it. And then I put in here that sometimes I go down to 1800 and hold for an hour. This one here was held for 2 hours. So anyway, there's a lot of variations here, a lot of things to do. Now I'm going to show you here's the setup I got. It's kind of a mess. I'm going to do the best I can with it. Here's my studio, in case you haven't seen the mess of the studio. But that's the deal. All right, so let's see what we've got. Hopefully this is going to work well. All right, so when I really do real glazing, I don't do all this, I'm not glazing, let's put it this way. There's a difference between making tiles and making pieces. So tiles, you can be all fussy and specific gravity and dipping times, grams per square inch, all this business. But if you're like a real potter, you're not doing that all the time. That's just in case you get into trouble. So here's how I really will go about it. I will take my glaze, this is my purple. I will, you gotta agitate a lot. I have brushes here too, which oftentimes I'll agitate. Because if a glaze sits, all of a sudden there's water on the surface. All right, so here's one I just did earlier, and I'll show you how I do the liner inside. So if I have a cup here, now I've gone around and made sure there's no sharp edges, everything's good. Okay, my main source of concern with these kind of things is the handle is very thin. But I want to make sure I get glaze on the handle first for sure. Now the way I'm going to do this, I did not wax. I'll show you a waxing way or not waxing. I don't like waxing because I drip and it's a problem, and I'm not making massive quantities. If I was doing like production, I probably would. All right, so you're going to vary this according to your situation. So here's my glaze. I stirred it a bunch. You saw I agitate it, and then I'm just going to pour on my handle first. Then I'm just going to pour around. I did about 2 things around, and then sometimes what I'll do is, while it's still wet, is just get that off the bottom a little bit. It gets it moist too, so the next coat won't stick as well. Now, as you know, when you're glazing, it's very boring to watch glazing because it's like watching paint dry, which we are watching it dry. It's also good to know to see how it's not even, because when I dip, I get one type of a coat versus when I pour. But in this case, I don't want dipping because I don't want a perfect line between these 2 glazes. So I'm going to now pour the handle again, pour the thing, decent coat. I figured out that's about the right amount, okay? Now I'm going to just wipe the bottom again. I'll probably have to like clean my sponge off, and then I'll clean the bottom. This glaze, if you don't clean the bottom up really well, I'll show you what happens. See here how it's blue there because I didn't clean it off real good, but you can clean it off much better than I did. All right, so now that that's done, I'm going to show you a wax one too while we're at it. See the bottom, I don't have to do anything. So that's the smart way to do stuff. Agitate, I'd wait for this to, well, I'd probably glaze another one in the meantime, but I don't want to get too ambitious here. Another thing, see there how that's, okay, that's easy to clean up, super nice. Now another thing I can do is I can also take my brush and then I can just lay some glaze on and up here to get it thicker and uneven. I like it to be, I don't want it to be completely even, but you can put all kinds of stuff on there to change the way it looks. All right, so now we're going to put that down. Now I'm going to get my seafoam green. I'm going to leave it in this bucket so you can see the other ways that I do things. Like I have this stirrer, toilet bowl cleaner is what it is. And I will get my bucket agitated with that pretty good. And now I'm ready to go and glaze this top one. I think I may have to use this bucket too, or you won't be able to see it. All right, so I'm gonna take a lot of times I'll leave my cup right on the side of the bucket there. And I'll pour right into the bucket, but in this case, I don't want to. Now, as you can see, this is still a little wet because I goofed off with the brush, but I'm not going to go that high. I want to overlap it here some. So again, I'll start with my handle, and then I'll just overlap some. You can see where it overlapped, it made these little bubbles. But that's not going to matter because it's it'll be real runny there and smooth. Like in this one, you can see there's no pinholes allowed in there because it's just running down. Okay, so now I may put a little extra towards the top here. Just sort of how you would glaze a tile, because I know I got space to run, and that's it. So this is done. I'm going to set this aside. Done. Oh, also, I don't know if you can see the inside, but the inside is all wet now. So I cannot now glaze the inside or I won't get a good enough coat. So I have to wait for that to happen. So usually I do those one day and the next day I come back and do the insides. But while we're doing this, let's glaze this one again. I mean, yeah, the top of it. Super exciting, I know. You know, that may not be what I wanted, but it may not be the end of the world. I may also come in here where it dripped a little and just like make it so it doesn't look like that. Just make it a little more natural looking. Then we're good. I'll do the top, and even when it's sitting in this cup, I'm going to agitate it. Sometimes if I'll agitate it just with a brush. And then I'll just pour here. Now another thing I could do is I could just dip this top rim in my bucket, because the line by the time it starts running will be uneven. I just don't want a totally even line here. And right where these join, I don't want it to be straight. So I can also just come in here and add some unevenness. You know, and right there we want it to be just not looking like somebody made a straight line. We want, it's, you know, the person I was trying to make pots like, made them like, Yu Ying Huang is her name, and from Taiwan, and so she made these like, I think they were like a field of flowers, and this was this, like this forest and the sky and all this business. So you want the line to be sort of naturally, and then with like this, it's no problem because by the time it runs, it's all uneven anyway. Okay, let me think if I think I did that pretty good. Okay, so now what I'll do, let me see, I think I'll do the white, the liner, so we're sort of done with all the glazing first. I got about 15 minutes. So now I'm going to take my white glaze, and just so you know, I'm not going to do all this stuff the same time in the same place like I am here. I would have a larger area. One thing about glazing is you have to be very patient and organized and neat and stuff. So that's why it's hard for me to glaze. I'll just let you know. Okay, so what we're going to do, since I don't have another cup and I don't want to go get it, I will often even just use these containers as cups. So this is pretty dry inside, so now I'm going to fill it up to about 3/4. And then I usually come around and just roll it once. And then when I'm pouring it out, I get it going. And that way, there's no dripping, there's no missed spots. When I pour it out, I sort of twist it. Okay, that probably is good enough because that liner was fairly thick. If I wanted to do 2, I could, but I think that's pretty good. You're not getting a lot of action with running and stuff inside, so 1 is probably sufficient. And then I just usually pour this back in here. I'll just clean that up a bit, and then now we're good to go. All right. I think that's it. All right, now, because I know you guys all like to measure specific gravity, I'm going to show you how I do it, and we'll go from there. So here is a scale, and then I usually put that on. I'm going to get these other implements here. I can show you some stuff while we're waiting on glaze to dry. Sometimes I'll do this at my workshop, so show them different ways to do specific gravity. So here's the way I normally do it. And so if I was doing this purple stuff, I would, so I get it zeroed. I have a little line here where I'm gonna go to there. So I'm gonna pour it over here so I don't make a mess. A lot of times it'll drip. So now 100 milliliters of water should weigh 100 grams. So the fact that this now weighs about 130 or so, you know, I said 135, but of course if I haven't stirred it a lot, there's more water. So there's some variance there. So then I can also, this is a nice 100 milliliter container they use in industry. So I will oftentimes just zero that scale, pour this in. So you can see I didn't quite, well, maybe I did, let's see. No, I didn't quite have 100 milliliters in there. What'll happen is it'll come out the top like that. See how it comes out? So now that weighs 132.5. And remember, in this one I had 130. And then I can also do it with this syringe is what I usually like because it's easy. So what I'm going to do is zero it. Now, just so you know, I will never do this many ways. This is ridiculous. But I wanted you to see. See, in this I can do because it only going to 50 here. So I have to double whatever's on here. So it's 64. So that is 128, about 130 also. So you see how you get different specific gravity readings depending on the precision of your stuff if you've agitated. So I don't get too fussy about specific gravity. I just use it to get close. And then the other thing you have to know about glazes is it's a relationship between, say for instance, the tile. So the absorption of this tile versus a stoneware, versus a dark stoneware, and the bisque temperature. So if you're bisquing to 04 and I'm bisquing to 08, we have a different absorption. So our specific gravity is going to be probably different depending on the amount of time. So it's a relationship of all those things. So that's why I don't get too fussy about it. But that's why you also don't want too many glazes because you can't keep track of it. But say for instance, you know, I dip this one dip. So that's the amount of time. So if I keep my bisque constant, then my time is going to always, you know, one dip, 1,000 or something. And then my when this all dries, I would go 1,002, 1,003. That's 2 dips. And then if I wanted a third dip, I would do that. Okay? So what we are most concerned about is the thickness of this on the pot, not the specific gravity, not the bisque, nothing. We want to know how much glaze is on that pot. Some people actually will weigh them, but the only people who do that are doing tiles or, like say for instance, industry, when you're telling a robot how much to put on and you know this many seconds of spray in this booth, blah, blah, blah. But you're not doing that as potters. So that's why I don't get too fussy about weighing things. But they do grams per square inch. 1 gram per square inch is what some people in industry use so they don't get dripping. So if you're a science-minded person, you may use that method. Okay, so let me then tell you what's most important here is, let's move this aside. So what we like to do in ceramics a lot of times is we'll take a needle, scratch that, see how deep it is, and then we'll remember that, how many dips, this, and then we'll see the outcome, and then we'll try to repeat it. In industry, they may use a gadget like this, micrometer, and they would put it on here, and then they would push it down and say, oh, that's 10 microns. The layer is 10 microns. Okay? I am not advocating this. I'm just showing you ways to do things. This is a little thing you can look in, a loop, and what you do, like if I took this tile that I just did, I would scrape off this glaze off of here. So now I can see the thickness of my glaze coat. And I would take, and I'll use this tile, but I would take this and I would hold it up to there and see, oh, 10 microns, 15 microns. And then all that does is let you know how much you've gotten on here. The reason I'm showing you this is because here's thin, medium, and thick. Any person can obviously see 3 coats is trying to crack and is too thick. And so you're going to, as a potter, you're going to work within some range of all these precise tools, or none at all. Many potters I know who are like really making pottery as a, they got to make 1,000 pots, next month, or they're not going to pay their bills. Well, they're not doing this. They're, got 1 or 2 glazes, stir them. They may never even do the specific gravity. They may, my one friend just stirred, and he could tell by the fluidity of it what it was, because he'd used the glaze so much. Okay, now, if you were a freak and you did want to measure, so specific gravity is one thing, but the other thing is the fluidity, the thickness of the viscosity of the slop. So this slop is very, let me see if I got a brush that's not all filthy. See, this cobalt glaze will contaminate everything. But you see how thick that is? That's reasonably thick. I would say that's like 140 something. Now here's a Zahn cup. It's a number 2. So these have little holes in the bottom. What they do with slip casting is they will put things in a cup, put the cup in the slip so they can tell how viscous this, or how thick their slip is, because it's. So what I did here is I took this glaze, the white, I put it in here and added some deflocculant. So the specific gravity is the same on these. And I'm going to show you, here's how you do it. You go 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. So that was about 20 seconds to go with this. Now, it's a lot like watching paint dry, as I said. Let me make sure I got this stirred now, because it sat there for a minute. All right, so now I'm going to do the one that I deflocculated with this. So it's the same deal: 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. 1,000, 14, 1,000, 15, 1,000. That took 15 seconds to get this to run out, and this was 20. So now, but a normal human being could look at this and say, yeah, that's way too watery. This is way too thick. This needs Epsom salts to make it flocculated back. But remember, same specific gravity. So if I'm glazing And my glaze is sitting around. It's got soluble sodium in it, like Nefci or Fritz, soda ash. It will naturally deflocculate. So you can imagine if I'm trying to glaze with this, I mean, right there, it's called a hanging drip when it's deflocculated like that. That's a sign that is not good. So versus if I have another tile and I dip like this, I haven't even stirred that, I would. Okay, so these two have this is probably at least twice as much glaze as this one, but the same dip, same specific gravity. And that's why you want to pay attention to, the flocculation or deflocculation of your glazes, because it'll make a difference to how the glaze goes on the pot. All right, I think I'm running out of time here. But so an application of this may be if I was a person who sprayed and I couldn't get it through the sprayer real well. I may deflock it a bit so that it'll go through my sprayer, but then I'm going to adjust the amount of time that I spray, the number of times around or the number of like that, so I get the same coat as this, but it goes through my sprayer better. All right, but most potters do not mess with this. This is just so you can see something about glazes and try to understand that the main thing we want is a reasonable thickness of a glaze, a specific gravity. Stir it plenty, depending on if it has not much clay in it, you're going to have to stir a lot more. And then apply it. Now remember, the difference that the way I'm applying, I'm going to just put some more up here so we can see. The way I apply with this pouring method is vastly different than dipping. Now, sometimes I dip. I have a bigger bucket. I have more things I'm doing. When I do like a whole like Shino kiln load, you have to have a lot of pots in there, 30, 40 cubic feet of work inside. So I'll have buckets and I'll do a lot of dipping then. I might pour the insides but dip the outsides. So that is a completely different way to glaze than pouring or spraying or painting. So you have to adjust to what you're doing. So like, if you think about it, now this has been sitting around for a while, so I have to agitate again. But if you think about what we got here, so this is like a stream of glaze going over it. So it's I'm not holding the whole pot in for that long. I'm just pouring a certain spot that long. So this is why you must pay attention to how much is actually, see, I can even see that's either the thinnest part of the pot or the least amount of glaze went on right there. And this is probably the most. So you can just pay attention to that, figure out ways to decorate with that, or I don't know what. That's it. Okay, so now I'm going to take my sponge, because the bottom is, I usually get it sponged off before, I set them aside, because it's a lot easier to do now while it's still moist. Okay, I think I beat that horse to death. Thank you for listening, and glaze on, kids. Make 1,000 in the half hour you have to wait here for the next presentation. All right, bye-bye.